Dear webinar participants, I am very glad to greet you at the beginning of our webinar, which we organizers of webinar consider as very important for our library professional activities. Our webinar, RDA Resource Description and Access in Practice, which is held by the IFLA Asia-Oceania Regional Division Committee. And moderator of the webinar, Piotr Lapo, it's me, Deputy Director of the Kazakh National Women's Teacher Training University Library. Also, I am member of the IFLA Asia-Oceania Regional Division Committee from 2023 and till 2027. And also Premila Gemic, Information Coordinator of the IFLA Asia and Oceania Regional Division Committee, a chart librarian with nearly 30 years work experience in the university and research libraries from Sri Lanka. I would like to say a few introductory words concerning importance of the webinar. And the aim of the webinar is to assist libraries in the Asia and Oceania region to implement RDA as cataloging standard and discovery tool for their resources. Introduced in 2010, RDA is one of the most important standards in the contemporary library world. The adoption of RDA has brought significant improvements in cataloging practices, user accessibility, and international interoperability. Moreover, RDA is built on the functional requirements for bibliographic records and functional requirements for authority data models, which provide a more user-centric approach to information retrieval. These models focus on how users search for and interact with resources, enabling libraries to offer more intuitive and relevant search experiences. RDA's structure facilitates improved resource discoverability. It emphasizes clarity in bibliographic records by clearly identifying relationships between works, creators, and subjects. For example, users can easily navigate from a novel to its translations, adaptations, and related critical works. This relationship-oriented structure supports richer and more connected catalogs, helping users find exactly what they need, even if they start with limited information. In addition, RDA supports linked data and semantic web principles, making library catalogs more compatible with modern digital ecosystems. Libraries can integrate the metadata with global knowledge networks, increasing the visibility of the collections on the web and enhancing user access beyond traditional catalogs. I am very glad that we have experienced and knowledgeable speakers today to present as basic concepts of the RDA standard and also practical experience of implementation RDA in routine library work. We have today Elisa is a metadata librarian with the University of Toronto Libraries, the largest academic library system in Canada. She is also a sessional instructor at the University of Toronto Faculty of Information, which is home for one of 8 IFLA accredited master's programs in library information science in Canada. Her experience with training staff and teaching students to catalog led her to join the RDA steering committee and as their educational and orientational officer. Elisa is also a member at large on the Canadian Committee on Cataloging and also currently a part of a grassroots working group that is developing an RDA training program in Canada. Second respectable speaker is Khaliza Jailani, Senior Deputy Director for Resource Discovery at National Library Board, Singapore. She directs a team responsible for the bibliographic functions of NLB, improving discovery using metadata, methodology management, linked data, and knowledge organization systems. She serves in IFLA bibliography section and is on the DCMI governing board as well as the RDA board. And search, not least respectable speaker, is Hugh Ling, Deputy Director for Metadata Services at National Library Board, Singapore. She managed cataloging operations and is very much involved with various initiatives enhancing the discovery of NLB's resources in an efficient manner. Please greet our distinguished speakers. And now I would like to give the floor to Elisa G for her presentation, which is entitled Teaching RDA. Elisa, please.
Thank you very much for the wonderful introduction, Peter. Thank you again for this invitation. I'm very honored to be part of this webinar today. Okay, so in November 2024, I understand that the IFLA Asia Oceania Regional Division Committee organized a Discovery Tools for Libraries webinar. And at that time, my colleagues Elisa and Hui-Ling presented the topic using RDA to improve discovery. So in the next 40 minutes, I will answer the question, why use RDA, with reference to the IFLA International Cataloging Principles and the Library Reference Model. I will share some general tips for training. After that, I will share information about RDA in different regions, including a brief case study of RDA training that is happening in my home country of Canada. Finally, I will talk about general supports that are available to anyone interested in learning and teaching RDA. I'm going to take a moment to do a very quick poll, and this is partly from my role on the RDA steering committee. I'm very interested to know from those of you who are attending today, does your library use RDA either in the original or official version for cataloging? So in a moment, I'm going to open up this very quick poll, and for you to participate, you just have to go to a website called slido.com. And in the join as participant box, which will look like this blue box at the center of the screen, just type in the digits 2395440. So I'm just going to open up the poll right now, and I'll pause for a minute for those of you who would like to participate. Again, to participate in the poll, you just have to go to slido.com and then input the number 2395440. I'm hoping the poll will work. This is just for me to get a sense of how many of you are already using RDA, whether in the original form that was released in 2010 or in the official version that was released at the end of 2020. Okay. Thank you. Oh, wonderful. This is a very nice distribution to see. I welcome the fact that more than half of you have already been using some version of RDA. And it's really lovely to see those of you who have not implemented RDA yet, because I'm hoping that you will learn something from today's presentation. Thank you again for participating in this poll. So to answer the question, why use RDA? First of all, let me just back up a little bit and remind you that RDA stands for Resource Description and Access, and that it is a standard that is partially informed by the IFLA International Cataloging Principles. So the ICP highlights a number of different areas. So in section 2, it talks about the general principles of cataloging, which include the convenience of the user, representation, economy, consistency and standardization, interoperability, openness, and accessibility. And these are all principles that the RDA Steering Committee tries to keep in mind when it is maintaining the standard RDA. In section 3 of the International Cataloging Principles, we know that cataloging is about describing entities, which are defined as abstract classes of key objects of interest to users. And we describe entities by using attributes and relationships. In section 4 of the ICP, we know that catalogers create a bibliographic description for each manifestation, and that the description can include attributes or links to attributes. Catalogers are encouraged to follow the International Standard for Bibliographic Description, or ISBD. RDA is not just a standard, it provides a complete package of the data elements that might be needed for description of entities, including guidelines and instructions for creating data for libraries and cultural heritage institutions. So by implementing RDA, what we hope is that the data will help users find, identify, search, obtain, and explore resources. We also hope that the data will continue to be compatible with flat files, such as card catalogs, bibliographic or authority data files as conventionally used by libraries, as well as relational or object-oriented databases, which many libraries also use. Moreover, implementing RDA will enable the data to be compatible with international models for linked data. Linked data is meant to help users discover information across a number of collections in libraries, archives, or cultural heritage institutions. It can also potentially save catalogers time to take advantage of more data sources beyond those found in isolated bibliographic or authority data files. So the latest version of RDA is based on the IFLA library reference model. Many RDA concepts and terminologies that have been introduced since 2020 are the result of LRM or because of the need to refine concepts that are outlined in LRM. So let me just define a few terms at a very high level. Like many entity relationship models and metadata schemes that talk about class and property, we see the term entity being used in RDA. So an entity is an abstract class of conceptual objects of interest to users. Entities are described using attribute elements, which are basically defined as a property of an entity. And entities can also be described through relationship elements. So a relationship element is a property that relates one entity with another entity within that same model. I recommend reading LRM to provide a foundation for understanding RDA. And please note that LRM is available in multiple languages, including English, Chinese Simplified Script, Korean, Portuguese, and Spanish, just to name a few. So for a very quick review of what the RDA entities are, the RDA toolkit only provides guidance and instructions on RDA entities. So an RDA entity can be narrowed down to one of the subtypes that I have listed on the screen in front of you. So they are work, expression, manifestation, item, agent, person, collective agents, family, corporate body, and nomen, time span, and place. So work, expression, manifestation, and item are what LRM calls the resource entities, and they serve the primary focus of resource description because they tend to be the objects that our library users are seeking when they are in the library, in an archive, or at a cultural heritage institution. These four entities are structurally important for any description of resources. The entity that I think many of us will be most familiar with is the manifestation entity, because we often base our descriptions on a manifestation, such as the publication of a resource, the issuance of a resource. We have a tradition in many cataloging communities to begin our description from the manifestation. For today, because of time constraints, I will not go into detailed explanations of each of these entities, but I encourage you to visit my slides after today's webinar to take a look at this link called the Template RDA Teaching Slides, where I provide more explanation of each entity. In RDA, we see a refinement of the LRM entity called collective agents, and this is based on the needs and practices of a number of cataloging communities around the world, where greater specificity or greater granularity is required. So the collective agents can be broken down further into two entity subtypes. They are called family and corporate body. And then we have these three additional entities introduced by LRM and that RDA has also adopted. They are nomen, time span, and place. Nomen refers to any instance where we have to provide a name or a title or an identifier for one of the other RDA entities. Nomen allows us to list multiple characteristics that may be associated with those specific names or titles or identifiers. That's why it is an entity. Time span refers to any finite period of time, whether that is a single date in a specific calendar or any period of time that has a beginning and an end. Place refers to any space that is reflected in the physical world, such as a region, a country, a city, a district, and so forth. All of these entities have something in common, and that is that multiple characteristics can be used to describe any of these entities. So that's what makes entities special, that there is some set of characteristics used to describe them. In RDA, there are two different ways that we can sort of visualize the resource description. So on the left side of the screen, I'm showing you a very basic example of what a graphical description might look like. So a graphical description shows us different entities that are related to each other through relationship elements. So in this diagram on the left, I'm showing you an example of two different entities that are related to each other through these inverse relationships, expression manifested or manifestation of expression. Individually, each of the entities can also be described through their own attribute elements. So in a graphical application, it might be possible to imagine our RDA data allowing a user to explore resources through these relationships. For more traditional kinds of resource description, we may expect to see a textual description, such as what you see on the right side of the slide. So here I've shown you two different descriptions. Let's say we have a description of a manifestation at the top of the right side of the slide. And then separately, we have a chiefly textual description as well of our expression on the bottom of the right side. It's useful to know that RDA is an international standard. So there are some aspects of RDA that will be familiar to many cataloging communities, and this is because of RDA's basis in the ICP and in LRM. What does internationalizing RDA actually mean? It means that communities have more control over how they implement RDA and provided that those decisions are compatible with the library reference model. The RDA text is maintained by the RDA Steering Committee, and currently there is regional representation from Oceania, Europe, and North America. The Steering Committee is working towards greater representation from Asia, Africa, and Latin America and the Caribbean. To log into the RDA instructions, you would need to go into access.rdatoolkit.org, or you can ask for a free trial. I would like to show you a very brief example of internationalization efforts. So underlying the RDA toolkit is the separate utility called the RDA registry. and I've provided a link to a specific element that is part of the RDA element set that you can find in the RDA registry. So for this example, I have taken the element title proper, and I've listed this on the left side of the screen. If you were to look up this element in the RDA registry, you can actually find a number of different language translations that are currently available. So for example, if you work with Chinese catalogers, you could point to the Chinese simplified script version of this element label. If you work with colleagues who catalog in Arabic, you could point out the Arabic label. Or if you work with colleagues who catalog in Turkish, you could point out the Turkish label. So efforts are already underway for a number of different translations, and I'll talk a little bit more about how translation happens with RDA. Basically, this is an example of our ongoing effort to provide greater internationalization of the standard. RDA is compatible with a number of different ontologies, including ISBD, MARC 21, and DCMI. RDA can also be represented using RDF. So just a quick review, ISBD is the International Standard for Bibliographic Description. Um, DCMI is the Dublin Core Metadata Initiative. MARC 21 is Machine Readable Cataloging. And RDF stands for Resource Description Framework. So the reason why I mention all of this is that I know that a number of different regions may refer to different standards or have preferences in place already for how they package their data. Just keep in mind that RDA is always developing, and there's interest in looking at how RDA data can be mapped to other ontologies. Um, I also understand that in some regions of Asia, instead of MARC 21, UniMARC is the version used for machine readable cataloging. So we could say that RDA is indirectly mappable to UniMARC because MARC 21 to UniMARC is mapped. Here's a very short screen capture of the RDA registry, which I have mentioned already. So I won't be exploring this in today's presentation due to time constraints, but I've provided the link in the slide for you so that you can explore it on your own. This particular page that I have screen captured shows you the maps for use with different ontologies. So if you clicked on any of these links that are shown on the page, they will allow you to download an entire set of mappings that show you the RDA elements that are covered in those respective data sets. So for example, if you want to see a list of all the RDA elements that map into ISBD, you can click on Map from ISBD Properties to Unconstrained Properties derived from RDA. The RDA registry is technically a kind of structure or skeleton for the RDA toolkit itself. So the RDA registry is used by developers and systems technicians, whereas the RDA toolkit is designed for catalogers because the RDA toolkit is where all of our cataloging instructions reside. So I have a very quick screen capture of what the login page looks like for RDA toolkits, and you would use access.rdatoolkit.org as your link to get into the site. I'm going to see if I can hop very briefly into the toolkit to show you what it looks like. So on this page in front of you, you should see the name of publisher element page of the toolkits, and you'll see definition and scope, which will actually be part of the RDA registry view of the same element. But what makes the RDA toolkit special is that it gives you the element reference card, which I'll talk about more in detail in a little bit. But it outlines the relationships to different entities. It gives you alternate labels, the mappings to other ontologies or data sets. And then here are our instructions. So we have recording instructions. It lists out different conditions and condition options that might be available. With RDA toolkits since 2020, many different options have been introduced because it is a way of allowing different cataloging communities to make decisions and determinations that are more suitable for their cataloging needs. So options are not requirements. It is up to communities to decide what they want to implement from these instructions. Okay, so I'm going to hop back into my presentation. I've mentioned the word elements a little bit, so I think I should define it more specifically. So elements are the properties we use to describe any entity. So I think I've already used these terms, but just to repeat, an attribute element is a characteristic of an entity. So for example, dimensions is an attribute of manifestation entity, or content type is an attribute of an expression entity. We also have relationship elements, which again are just telling us a relationship that one entity has with another entity. So for example, if you chose the element place of publication of a manifestation, it's telling us that there's a relationship between the manifestation entity and the place entity. Or if you have the element author person, you're telling us that there is a relationship between the work and a person. So elements are really important because they are the building blocks for our metadata description set. An example of a metadata description set could be any bibliographic record or any authority record or any other kinds of records that you might want to generate. In linked data applications, elements and values of elements can potentially be reused or recombined. I'm going to take a moment to look at a few common RDA elements that are used for describing manifestations. And I'm using these just as examples to illustrate how RDA works. So the first one I want to highlight is the place of publication element, which is defined as a place associated with the publication, release, or issuing of a published manifestation. So on the slide, I've provided links to the various elements here, place of publication. I've also provided a link to the RDA registry label for this element, which is called has place of publication. And this element maps to the IFLA LRM label called has association with place, and it also maps to a number of possible MARC 21 bibliographic tags and subfield codes. Another common RDA element that catalogers might think about when describing manifestations is name a publisher. Name a publisher is a name of an agent who is responsible for publishing a manifestation. So again, I've provided the label is found in the RDA toolkits, the label is found in the RDA registry, and the mapping to IFLA LRM label, DCMI term, and MARC 21 bibliographic tags and subfield codes. Related to that, we often have to think about the date of publication. And this element is defined as a time span during which a published manifestation is published, released, or issued. So in RDA toolkits, the label is date of publication. In RDA registry, the label is has date of publication, and it maps to the following IFLA LRM label, DCMI term, and MARC 21 bibliographic tags. So we're going to try to take all of these elements together to partially catalog a book. So for today's example, I have selected a very popular Canadian novel called Anne of Green Gables. I've embedded a link to the VF description of this work in case any of you are interested. So with this example that I have selected, we have a book that is a Chinese translation of the novel in traditional Chinese script. The translated title is, as shown above here, Hong Fa Ani. Sorry, my Chinese pronunciation is not very good, but this is the title that's been provided to the publication. And we see the ISBN as well, 978-986-489-8916. So in analyzing this example, we can say that we have a book with this ISBN that happens to be a manifestation of an expression that expression being the Chinese translation in traditional script. And this is an expression of a work, the work being the Canadian novel Anne of Green Gables. For your reference, you can find existing descriptions already in various catalogs around the world, including WorldCat and the Edmonton Public Library catalog. Let's look at the individual RDA elements separately. So RDA instructions are written in a way that allows catalogers to provide a more conventional bibliographic description, but it also allows the data to be repackaged in the future for RDF applications. So if we were to express a particular statement as an RDF triple for the element identifier for manifestation, we would say that the subject of the RDF triple is the manifestation. The predicate is our elements label identifier for manifestation. And our object would be whatever the value is for this particular RDF triple. So if we fill in the values, we can figure out some way to point to this particular manifestation. So that's our subject, has identifier for manifestation, 978-986-489-8916. A conventional database input might look like the following. We might have the field label selected in our system that says identifier for manifestation, and then we input the value, which will be this ISBN, serving as the identifier. If we look at the next three elements, place of publication, name of publisher, date of publication, again, we could present it as part of an RDF triple. So we would have three separate statements that are three separate RDF triples. Or we might input the data into a more conventional database or application. So we would select in our system particular fields such as place of publication, input the value, name of publisher, input the value, date of publication, input the value. Regardless of how granular our input might be on the back end of our database, we can configure our public display to look differently. There is nothing in RDA that prevents us from configuring the public display in a way that suits our users best. So theoretically, a catalog could be displayed so that the place of publication, name of publisher, and date of publication all display together as one string. So RDA doesn't tell us not to do this. We can go ahead and do it if we needed to. Just to illustrate further how our granular RDA elements might be repackaged in the future for linked data applications, technically any part of our RDF triple could be replaced with a link. So if in the future we move our data from a traditional database into a linked data application environment, we could replace our subject with a link. We could replace the value of our predicate with a link if that exists. Or if it doesn't exist, we could treat it still as a literal string. And similarly, the value for our object, we could replace with a link if it exists. So in this example, I've just replaced the values with a Wikidata link if they exist, assuming that Wikidata is the namespace that we are prioritizing. So after talking about those examples, I want to share some general tips for new users of the official RDA toolkits who may include catalogers who already have original toolkit experience. It's really important to dedicate time for navigation. Because the organizational structure of the official RDA toolkit is based on entities and elements, and there are no prescribed order of rule numbers to follow anymore, catalogers will need time to adjust to the look and feel of the official RDA toolkit. The RDA toolkit instructions will now be found in three kinds of pages. They are element pages, entity pages, and guidance pages. There are also some key guidance pages that I would recommend reading first. They are the Introduction to RDA, Objectives and Principles Governing RDA, data elements, terminology, user tasks, and well-formed RDA. The RDA entity pages will orient catalogers around the elements used to describe an entity. So for example, to answer the question, what elements do I need for describing a manifestation? Catalogers can also find elements using a search box that is located in the toolkit. So here's a screen capture of what the original toolkit looks like for a particular set of instructions around carrier type. So for those of you familiar with the original toolkit, you'll remember that there are rule numbers throughout the standard. As you shift your focus to the official RDA toolkit, I encourage you to stop thinking about rule numbers and try to focus instead on the elements that was being described by a rule number. So for example, 3.3 is all about carrier type. Try to focus on the fact that element type is the element label. So what you would then do is go into the official RDA toolkits and type the terms carrier type into the search box and pull up the element page. So if you were to do that, just gonna see if I can click into the toolkits. Um, okay. Apologies. Please just bear with me because the toolkit does time me out on occasion if I am not using it actively. So if I were to type in carrier type, it will take a moment, but it will go through a search process and it will retrieve an element page for you. So I'm looking specifically for a result that is labeled as elements. So if you click on it, you go through this, you should see a number of different recording options and guidance to follow. So this is the new layout for finding instructions. So within an element page, there are some key details outlined at the top of the page called the element reference card. So the element reference card is really useful because it tells us the domain or the RDA entity that is being described by the element. It also gives us alternate labels that you might have seen in the past or that you might see in the RDA registry. And it gives us the mappings to other ontologies if those mappings exist. If you are dealing with an element that is a relationship element, you will see additionally a range label. So the range is the other RDA entity within the relationship. If we have an element like data publication, there is a relationship between the manifestation and the date entity, or sorry, the time span entity. So therefore, in the data publication reference card, we will see domain is manifestation and range is time span. In the original RDA toolkits, there were two appendices that were very popular for reference. They were Appendix I and Appendix J, which told us what relationship elements to use in certain settings where we have to provide additional information about agents. So official RDA does not maintain these appendices anymore because the relationship designators have been worked into the element labels themselves. So basically, relationship designators are now elevated to the status of an element. So if you were to look up, for example, the term author from the Appendix I of the original RDA toolkits, now in the official toolkit, you'll be looking for the element author agents. There are also relationships between elements. So we have something called an element supertype and an element subtype. Basically, element supertypes are broader elements and element subtypes are narrower elements. So as with our example of author agents, author agent is an element supertype for author person. If you looked at the author person element page and you scroll down to the very bottom of the page, you'll see that it tells us on this author person page that a broader element of this element is author agent. If you needed to be more specific than just using the term author person, you could go with one of the narrower elements, such as librettist person or lyricist person, and so forth. Communities decide how broad or how narrow an element they want to use. Not the RDA steering committee. This decision is up to communities. So, communities should provide an application profile to tell their catalogers which elements to use. I encourage you to take a look at a handout that I developed for the RDA Steering Committee called the RDA Teaching and Training Tips, where I share more ideas for training and teaching. So to get to this handout, you go to the rdatoolkit.org website, click on the menu Learning Resources. Then, from that page, you want to scroll down to Resources for Educators and find RDA Teaching and Training Tips. On the screen in front of you is a screen capture of what that handout looks like. So I'll speak very generally about some approaches to teaching. When we are teaching, we want to consider the differences between pedagogical and andragogical approaches. So andragogy is a term that was introduced in the 19th century and that was later developed into a theory of adult education by a 20th century American educator. In the pedagogical approach, learning relies on the instructor, and the instructor is the one who evaluates the learning. In the andragogical approach, learners are self-directed and learners assess their own learning through self-evaluation tools. In the pedagogical approach, students are assumed to have no experience in the topics that are taught, while in the andragogical approach, learners will have some experience. In terms of readiness, the pedagogical approach requires instructors to identify the learning outcomes to master, while the andragogical approach assumes that learners are willing to learn whenever a change occurs. Pedagogical approaches assume that the learners will want to learn about a subject based on an assumed natural sequence of contents, and this sequence is determined by the instructor. On the other hand, with the andragogical approach, learning is organized around real tasks and problems that might be encountered in a workplace setting. Finally, with a pedagogical approach, students are motivated by external pressures such as the need to pass a course or get a high grade or earn a diploma, whereas in the andragogical approach, learners are seeking self-esteem, confidence, and self-actualization. So, why do I mention the distinction between pedagogical versus andragogical approach? Many of us who are engaged in training maybe think about how to train our colleagues in a workplace setting, and we might default to andragogical assumptions around teaching, but we should keep in mind that sometimes employees appreciate best practices more when they understand that there are underlying principles. Conversely, if we are instructors in a master's or other kind of library science program teaching students with no experience, students actually crave hearing about what day-to-day situations catalogers experience in the workplace. So we can bring some of that into our classroom teaching. Finally, I want to talk a little bit about how other regions are supporting RDA adoption and training. So, as I mentioned near the beginning of my presentation, RDA Steering Committee is very interested in providing more language translations of RDA. So, there is a formal working group called the Translations Working Group that is chaired by our translations team liaison officer, Szabolcs Dansk, who is in Hungary. The original language of RDA is English, and the working group that Szabolcs chairs works on translating the RDA text. Here are the different translations that are underway right now. So for partial translations, which focus on just the RDA registry, we have Greek, Danish, Dutch, Estonian, German, Turkish, and Latvian translations underway. For full translations, which translate both the RDA registry terms and the RDA guidance and instructions themselves, we have Italian, Portuguese, Catalan, Chinese in simplified and traditional scripts, Norwegian, Spanish, Arabic, French, and Finnish all underway. There are regional RSC groups in place to promote implementation of RDA in their respective regions, to help develop the standards so that it is more internationally relevant, and to share information and collect feedback from constituents. Right now, there are 3 committees in place. They are based in Oceania, Europe, and North America. The RSC is working with RDA board members to establish representation from Asia, Africa, and Latin America and the Caribbean. For regions that do not yet have a committee in place, there is also a wider community engagement officer. This role is currently filled by Charlene Chow in the United States. The wider community engagement officer enables RDA users without a regional representative to still be represented. The WCEO works closely with various working groups and other position holders to help promote and develop RDA as an international standard. Finally, I want to share a little bit of information about how RDA training is going in my home country of Canada. So, as a background, the Canadian population only numbers about 36.9 million, although this is based on the 2021 census, which is now a few years old. Current population modeling is closer to 41.6 million. So, despite the fact that our landmass is quite large, our population is quite small, and we are quite localized to the south part of our country. Most of the population lives within 100 kilometers of the Canada-United States border, and 73% of our population live in an urban center. So it means that it can be challenging to reach out sometimes to our colleagues in rural areas. And there's a lot of influence from what kind of training is happening in the United States. In terms of languages, we have 2 official languages. They are English and French. However, only about 21.4% identify French as their first official language in the country, whereas 75.5% identify English as their first official language. Only 18% of our population are fully bilingual in both official languages. 30% of our population speak a non-official language, and the top 5 of those are Spanish, Mandarin, Punjabi, Arabic, and Hindi. So I mentioned this because in our attempts to develop a national training effort, we do have to keep both official languages in mind, but it can be a little difficult depending on the region of the country if we will find someone who is able to train in both languages. Currently in Canada, there is no official national agency that is responsible for cataloging training. Therefore, several librarians and I across the country have gotten together to establish a grassroots group called the RDA Training in Canada Working Group. Our members come from universities, public libraries, and a national library based in Quebec. We hope to expand our membership to develop online training materials that will bridge our vast geographic distances, and we hope to achieve formal status as a national training group. Our members have already delivered several workshops to date, including in-person workshops at the Ontario Library Association pre-conference, the British Columbia Library Association pre-conference, and l'Association des bibliothécaires du Québec, or the Quebec Library Association. At my home institution, which is the University of Toronto Libraries, we have a 2-wave tri-campus program underway. So we have a train the trainer approach that we started in September of last year, where we recruited trainers from amongst supervisors and original catalogers across all 3 campuses of our university library system. And from November to June of this year, we have been watching the recordings from the Program for Cooperative Cataloging Phase 1 Introductory RDA Training webinars. And we have been meeting every 2 weeks to discuss what we have learned. We are lucky to have a few local experts who are available to help answer questions. We hope that in July we can start planning and preparing training materials so that we can roll out our Wave 2 training program starting in November. Our plan is from November to April of next year to implement wider library system training that will reach all catalogers. And we will then identify perhaps more specialized training, such as instructions around rare books, music, and serials cataloging. Catalogers will begin using the official RDA toolkit in April 2026, which will give our catalogers about 1 year to get used to the RDA toolkit. This will coincide with the countdown period for the original RDA toolkit, which is set to be decommissioned sometime in May 2027. Finally, I teach a course at the Faculty of Information at the University of Toronto, and this is a Master of Information course on cataloging. It takes place over 12 weeks. We have 1 class on LRM, 3 classes on RDA using the official RDA toolkit to catalog, and 2 classes on encoding RDA data in MARC 21. We adopt a flipped classroom approach so students read and watch pre-recorded lectures before coming to class, and then we spend class time reviewing and practicing our application. For general supports on RDA learning, I have provided a list of different resources. I would really encourage you to take a look at the book Introducing RDA, published by ALA Editions and written by Chris Oliver. There's also an RDA Toolkit YouTube channel that you might want to visit. And of course, I am always available, so please feel free to reach out to me with your questions. I've already mentioned that there is a learning resources webpage on the RDA Toolkit website, where you will find all of these resources that I have listed on the slide in front of you. I've mentioned the handout for training tips already, but I also want to promote the template RDA teaching slides, which you are all welcome to use or adapt and customize for your own training needs. The slides are free for you to use. Just take a look at the Creative Commons terms of use before you begin using them. So thank you so much for this invitation. The RDA Steering Committee always welcomes your feedback on how to support educators and trainers. And if you have general questions about RDA or you want to chat about how to train your community, please reach out to me. I can be reached at elisa@rdatoolkit.org or at elisa.c@utoronto.ca. Thank you so much for inviting me to this webinar.
Thank you, Elisa, for a very informative presentation about very actual, urgent, important issue of our library activity. Frankly speaking, I don't know your presentation scared our webinar participants or encourage them to use RDA. We will see, and maybe we will tell us at the end of our webinar. Also, I would like to ask you to put links from your presentation in chat. Okay?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you
I can do
again.
so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now I would like to provide the floor for next speakers. It's Khaliza Jailani, Senior Deputy Director of the Resource Discovery and Management Division, and Hui Ling Eng, Deputy Director for Metadata Services at National Library Board of Singapore. The title of the presentation on the results of the survey on the use of RDA in libraries in the Asian Oceania region in 2023-2024. Please, dear colleagues.
Okay, everyone can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So, okay, hi everyone. We are Haliza and Hui Ling from NLB Singapore. So today we are kind of doing a follow-up presentation from our session last year on, why one should be interested in using RDA to improve discovery, as also kindly elaborated on just now by Elisa. In particular, we are going to take a look and see if we can uncover any insights as to the adoption and use of RDA within Asia. So, as mentioned, we had previously spoken about, extensively about why you should use RDA and in many ways it could help improve the discovery of collections. If you're interested in the full deck and the transcript, please take a look at what has been archived at the IFLA repository. Alternatively, if you're already curious, and excited based on Elisa's presentation, do check out all the resources that she has highlighted. And, you could just, even if you just go out to the RDA Toolkit website, there's a lot of information from all the latest news to all the education resources, etc. Yeah. So before we start on the topic proper on the usage of RDA in Asia, here's a little bit of a context where it pertains to the definition of RDA in the survey. So RDA, as Elisa has shared just now, being a very dynamic standard that responds to all the evolving environments, data models, etc., has in recent years moved from what we call original RDA to some to what is now official RDA in 2020. So this kind of mirrors the consolidation of the Ferber, Fred, Fresnel models into what is now IFLA LRM, the library reference model. And since the launch of official RDA, we do have some libraries like the National Library of New Zealand, who has announced their move towards official RDA implementation. For the purposes of this survey, though, we are not differentiating between the two, just so that we can really tell who has kind of dipped their toes into the RDA standard and just how aware the region is of this thing in general. So a key reason actually as to why we did this survey is because we are currently serving as a representative of Asia for the RDA board. And we just wanted to kind of have a better understanding as to how things are in the region and what are our target areas, what are some concerns the region may have as to taking out the standards, etc. And also because it has been quite a while since a last similar survey was done. And performing a survey is naturally has its own obstacles because Asia is so huge, right? Where do you even start? And as such, we reach out to our colleagues here over the IFLA Asia Oceania Regional Office, who very kindly help us reach out to the libraries on their mailing list so that we can try to hit as much of the right institutions as possible. We also separately reach out from our own existing contacts and ambush some of the visiting librarians who happen to be in Singapore just to find out how things are going. But still, it proved to be kind of difficult to get responses. As you can see, that only about 10% of the 200 plus libraries contacts actually responded. Uh, National and academic libraries make up the bulk of the respondents. While this is kind of small because the response rate was only about 10%, the sample does kind of serve to validate some of our observations from our cursory digging online as to how RDA may be taken out or implemented in Asia and kind of mirrors the findings that we did while surveying within Singapore itself. The latter is kind of a cool observation to note because in Singapore wise, we might not necessarily think of ourselves as a good representation of what happens in Asia. In this case, given that we do have predominantly English collections and inherited many Western-based cataloging traditions. So any transition we kind of make from say EACR to an RDA is much facilitated that way because we have a wealth of resources and knowledge to tap on. Yeah, that said, it is still kind of encouraging to see that most of the respondents, about 60% of them has actually adopted RDA, although it's kind of in certain circumstances in a hybrid model to also accommodate for their local cataloging traditions and rules and basically their local collections. A sizable number of the remaining libraries, while they have not implemented the RDA standard, at least have plans or interest to adopt the standard in the future, which makes us feel good as well because this means that the potential of the standard in improving discovery of their collections is kind of recognized. Most, however, I think the lack of expertise as the key obstacle in taking on RDA, which is also kind of a way why we are trying to do all these presentations to kind of bridge that gap, starting from Eliza's excellent presentation just now. Yeah. Going into a bit more detail as to the perception of RDA in the region, most of the institutions who have implemented RDA do feel that it's easy to use and it has helped improve searchability and discoverability. And about more than half have actually converted all their records to RDA, and most of them adopt minimally what's common to most original RDA implementations, the 33678 carrier element fields and relationship designators like your authors, your editors, or whatnot. Yeah, most of them who has implemented it have access to the RDA toolkit, although they do find the current toolkit, i.e. what we refer to as the official RDA model rather than the original, is a tad hard to use and they do cite a need for training. Where it pertains to training, though, most of the people are using online training materials or just simply getting trained on the job. We do sense a need, a request from the survey results that, many are asking because of the new toolkit, can they get more training and refreshers, or are there more targeted guidelines or adversaries services that can help them pick up the official RDA standard? Oops. Okay. So besides findings from the surveys, we also did a bit of digging online of primarily the larger Asian countries, which are more accessible to us in Singapore, that most likely than not, most Asian countries tend to have their own cataloging rules. And if they do use RDA, it is implemented more for the Western materials than uniformly across all collections. There are also, of course, some who still prefer ACR2 or focusing their efforts on different altogether. For Singapore and our immediate neighbor Malaysia, given our shared history and as elaborated on just now, most of us are using RDA in conjunction with Mark 21. So what can we conclude from the survey? I think one key thing to note is what perhaps we all as Asians know, even without doing a survey actually, that Asia is incredibly geographically diverse and culturally heterogeneous with a variety of languages to deal with. So any outreach is bound to be fraught with challenges. And while the main RDA board has had representative for the Asia region since 2018, it has proved to be kind of difficult for a single rep to actually effectively reach out to the entire region. Well, I would do say that we do have pockets of communities around within different countries, especially with a huge country like China or India. But we don't necessarily come together as one or have a very established common network that is specifically active in the matters of cataloging or metadata for us to be able to reach out or even just discuss simple implementation challenges together effectively. So this is kind of very much unlike the Western countries, which you can see for the screen. They have many interest groups and communities working with the main RDA board, like your URIC for Europe, NARDAC. The Australian libraries are coming together to study how to implement official RDA together. And now NZAC has taken the lead for New Zealand in implementing and sharing their training materials, etc. All this kind of shine the light as to what we as Asia can do to proceed on with taking out RDA, because we think that having these kind of shared channels and groups, perhaps within further sub-Asian regions, would be a more conducive environment for us to learn and discuss, and more effective way for us to share documentation and just ask simple questions like, how do I do this? How do I get started on RDA? Yeah. And so over to Elisa.
Thanks, Hui Ling. Okay, I'll continue from here. Hui Ling mentioned there in the previous slide that there are a few of these regional groups which have been formed outside of the RDA board. And there is one at the right-hand corner which I wanted to highlight. It was just formed last month. That is the RDA Latin American and the Caribbean Committee. So as of now, for the RDA coverage around the world, two regions do not have their interest group set up yet, and this would be Africa as well as Asia. Both areas are huge regions, have huge contents, and of course it will take us time to do it. So in a way, we are trying to sit this out, because there is really a need. I think maybe some of you who have read my response as to why RDA is beneficial, there is really a need for libraries to start moving from just format-specific descriptions, but to more an entity relationship kind of description that will be format agnostic, platform agnostic. It doesn't matter whether it's for print, physical, non-print, or digital. You can describe it and link it and make it more accessible across the internet as well as the local platforms. Okay, so now there are more details of the survey which we can share separately, but from the survey, we now know that we need to find a way to develop a more effective outreach platform so that we can easily share our cataloging practices and gather information about not just RDA, but other standards for cataloging and metadata, and also developments for Asia. And we need to surface that to the world we are very much underrepresented in the cataloging world with regards to the developments of the standards and how we can improve the discovery of the collections that we are in charge of. So we would like to build a network of experts to tap on or to share resources, and such as, implementation takeaways like what we're doing today, application profiles for sharing, or just general advice on cataloging standards, that we can sync up with the rest of the world and better promote discovery of our collections. And RDA is developed specifically for the digital world in mind, and we are all increasingly a part of this digital world. Of course, it will also be good to be able to surface unique issues to Asia so that the standards can adequately cover these areas as well, because the global library community can benefit from our experience too. So as part of this, we're also looking to link up parties interested in translating the standard into various Asian languages with the RDA board, which Elisa has highlighted, and we have the names here as well, since having the RDA vocabularies or standard in people's own native languages would naturally help awareness and adoption. And of course, there is an intention to continue to promote more awareness and education about RDA, specifically on Asian platforms, which is primarily the reason for this webinar, and perhaps more will come your way. Next would be to continue to promote awareness of RDA as a standard and try to line up the resources, much like Elisa's presentation, that we hope will shed light on how RDA can be implemented and used in your own institution. Right, so I'd like to share about NLB Singapore's implementation. We implemented original RDA on 1st April 2013. And as the National Library of the country, we decided to move towards RDA for 3 reasons. To keep up with international practices, to facilitate our linked data implementation, and to prepare for the new encoding standard or ontology BitFrame. A project team was formed comprising of both catalogers and managers, and we scoped the project to include both the physical and the digital collections. Part of the scope 2 is to enable the creation of RDA records based on local practices and encoding schemes. But to be practical, as we had only 1 year, we chose to exclude legacy records conversion, which we undertook about 3 years down the road. So for that particular point of time, we just looked at what can be done with what we have in hand and what we are going to do in the immediate future. So the steps towards the move are indicated on the left of the slide there. Most importantly, formulating the strategy and objectives, followed by the development of an action plan. It's also important to set up key milestones for the project team, which included, in this case, creating trial sample records, which we did the year before. And we knew we needed our local practices to be supported, so this became a deliverable and a milestone. And next is customizing training for staff and communicating the change to our user groups. We take care of the National Library and the public libraries in the Singapore library system. So we needed to communicate this change to them, even though it is more a back-end thing, but they will see the results on their OPAC. Okay, and we also obtained feedback, which was incorporated into version 2 of our policies, for example. So the cataloging policies are dependent on changing the outlook of the cataloger. So from formats, which is the way the previous standard AACR2 was organized, to viewing cataloging from the FERBA perspective, work, expression, manifestation item. We also use the Library of Congress rule interpretations and the LCPCC policy statements to suit our local needs. Here is an example I put there on NLB's decision on relationship designators. So for your implementation, you can do the same. You can use whatever existing practices that has been published, examine what you need literally, and then amend it to suit your own needs. And here are some takeaways that we want to share. Communication with catalogers is key. To that end, we held discussions and gathered inputs from them, which I have listed here. Access to good recommended resource materials is important because there is an overabundance on the internet. And I've also listed some for original RDA that we used on the below left-hand corner. We also had discussions on RDA's usability, such as changes to workflows, requirements for the library system, and the challenges if no updates were made to legacy records, such as the impact of having mixed records for both the public and the library staff. Right? If you don't have RDA in some of these catalog records and you have RDA in another set of records, set of collections, and would the users be confused? How would the system handle it? Things like that. Interfacing with IT and acquisitions are also important, so as to set requirements for our new library system, because at that time we were looking for a new library system, and also to manage expectations with vendors, whether ebook vendors, overdrive, cataloging vendors, etc. Training is of course priority, and to that end, the local customization required a do-it-yourself training plan where we repackage the materials to suit our needs. To make it easy for the staff, we focused on 3 things: understanding RDA, changes necessary for marked records, and emphasizing on consistency in application. So the actual training was divided into 4 modules: cataloging with RDA, focusing on Ferber, Fred, Facade, and changes from AACR2 to RDA, use of the RDA toolkit, and copy cataloging with RDA. We also had a collaborative team room that served as a first point of reference for our staff and a place for issues to be documented. Other factors we considered include planning for a settling in period, because the catalogers still need to meet their daily normal cataloging requirements. The books are still coming in, it's not going to stop, so they still have to continue cataloging, at the same time being trained for the new standard. And I'd like to say that this is frequently happening in the library world too. With BitFrame on the way, we will have to undergo this again. So we are currently reviewing official RDA, as Hui Ling said just now, to see how we will adopt it. And we are targeting to complete our implementation by end next year, because the existing toolkit, the original toolkit, will be retired on 30th May 2027. And we'd like to get our catalogers up to speed with using official RDA that is based on the library reference model before then. So we are different, we could be different in that, owing to our history, we have very much adopted the Western cataloging rules, like the AACR2, and we use English as our official working language across the 4 main races in Singapore. So our adoption and implementation may be slightly easier. That said, here are some of the key considerations that we think would be useful for all institutions to think about. So first of all is the purpose. You need to be very clear about why you are adopting it. So some of those questions that was raised is good. You need to know why it is beneficial, why you need it, right? And this will help to scope your implementation in terms of what you hope to see or gain from it. Next, resources. What are the resources that you have at your disposal? Do you have a purely in-house cataloging team? Or do you depend on vendor supplied records? Or do you have a mix of both? And how about the finances, your funding? All this would affect how you are going to implement RDA. Likewise, this resourcing will also affect how you implement your mixture of records. Do you want to do for only new records? Are you able to convert existing records? Or can you live with a hybrid that is a mix of RDA and non-RDA records? Thirdly, collections. Focus on what makes sense for your collections. If you are delving straight into official RDA, you may get overwhelmed by the many elements because there are thousands. So we'd like to say you can ignore them and select only what you need by focusing on the characteristics of your collection, the level and type of description that would be useful to your collections, and your encoding scheme, and work from there. So like I say, it's flexible. You need to know what you want, and then you use the RDA to help you achieve that. And fourth, definite timeline. Set a timeline for your institution, because this is true for all project management. It's always good to have the end goal in sight. With RDA, things can likely drag on. We don't want that to happen. Okay, fifth is the training and publicity. It goes without saying that you will need to train your catalogers, but you may also wish to train the rest of the library staff, especially if it affects downstream services, the IT side, the librarian serving at the reference counter, and maybe to your patrons as well, if there are visible changes or improvements to your search. Last but not least, this may be specific to NLB, as we have a lot of services, a myriad of services outside of our ILS systems that consume our cataloging metadata. If so, there will be changes to the encoding, to the way things are described, and this can affect how those other systems use the data. So ultimately, the key is how this standard and the data we create using this new improved standard future-proofed for interoperability across platforms and systems and collections can be optimized for the discovery of library collections. Thank you.
Thank you, Elisa. Thank you, Hugh, for very informative, detailed presentation with practical recommendations. I understand that for so-called people who just start to implementation of RDA, very rich information, and there are many doubts how to be successful in such business. But anyway, I think it's our future, and we should undertake certain efforts to be successful in that. Now, the session of question and answers. And firstly, I think it would be good to answer questions in question and answer section, and then questions of participants who raised hand. So I think all participants are interested in a recorded version of the presentations, video recording of the webinar. Primila, could you answer the question? Primila?
Yeah. Sorry. I think before that, I think most of the questions posted on question and answer section are already answered by, thanks, Elisa. From the very beginning, you answered a lot, and Elisa also answered. So I think because of the limited time that we have, we can allow raise hand questions. And regarding the recording,
Version.
Yeah, recorded version, it will be posted on IFLA regional IFLA website under events with links to presentations, recorded version, and most probably Q&A will be posted, and all the attendees will be informed once it updated.
Okay, thank you. There are answered questions. Have any studies been done to see how users of our libraries have benefited from all the efforts we librarians are carrying out to enhance access? Any stories to share where users were delighted that RDA exists? Who would like to answer the question?
Maybe I go first, Peter. So I don't know of any studies that are specific to this result. It could be, done by the individual libraries and implementations. And with regards to the stories that can be shared, also, I don't think so, because you know why? RDA is supposed to be transparent. It is for us catalogers to figure it out, to make it easy. And the easier it is for our public, our patrons, our library users to access the resources, that means the harder it is we work back end. I always tell myself that. So if RDA can be seen as quite complicated because we are not used to that kind of conceptual thinking, we look at it in terms of formats, etc. But once we are used to doing it according to our application profile, our collection characteristics, and so on, it can be quite easy. And if we can do that, the results up front to the users will be seamless. So like, for example, how you are searching for your resources now on Google, on the internet search engines, they use schema.org, an ontology that was developed by the search engines Yahoo, Yandex, Google, etc. It's seamless, but they have a lot of money to do this and also to support it with their own user search algorithms, etc. For us in the libraries, we don't have access to so much funding, but we do have consistencies that in cataloging that we can implement, and that is what RDA is about. So if you ask me about the stories to share, in NLB there are, but we cannot attribute it solely to RDA. It could be because of the service itself, it could be because of the user interface, it could be because of the UX design. The more important thing is, can people discover what they need?
For example, could you research, study, how to say, log files? For example, you see that some browsers came to your online catalog, and maybe a number of such searches increase after RDA implementation. Because
yes, that's possible.
Okay.
And to do that, the implementation will have to implement something like your Google Analytics in order to do that tracking. So for now, we have just pushed out our newest widget that uses linked data that also encapsulates these RDA standards. But the tracking is still in progress, so I cannot share yet what the outcome is.
Okay, thank you. Next question. In the survey carried out by the National Library of Singapore, one of the reasons for not using RDA was high costs. Can you share how much cost implementation of RDA is costs?
I don't really think we have a ballpark figure, but if you think about it, all the efforts by your staff time to study the standard and then come up with the ways to implement it, all the people you got to involve in the training, it's a lot of human cost, I would say. The time, your staff time that is taken out, that is probably going to take out a huge chunk. Because like everybody, salary is the daily cost that you can't escape from. Yeah.
You mean these costs more related to time?
Yeah, staff time, and it's not.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's not just really restricted within your cataloging departments, because we do have to talk to the IT folks, and also even to our just of processing, even the frontline services staff. When they see something different in the catalog record, what does that mean? How can they better use that information to actually service the patrons, etc. So all these time and effort that we spend in implementing that is often goes unseen, but that to me is the largest cost. Other than maybe if you hire, say, some of the vendor who do RDA conversion for you, that may be a one-time cost, but it doesn't stop just at converting or just at implementing. It's all the downstream effects. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Sometimes we use copy cataloging. Would you know if vendors like American or European vendors already use official RDA? I think vendors, it's mean like information resources vendors, I guess. Well, because there are different kind of vendors. For example, for information resources like databases or some tools. For example, integrated library systems. I guess it's maybe about information resources.
To my knowledge, vendors who are providing us with publications from North America and from Western Europe, they are not specifically saying that they have moved into the official RDA, but what we have contracted to provide for us is RDA compliant data or RDA data in Mark 21 format, because we're still in a Mark 21 environment at the University of Toronto Libraries. Because the RDA toolkit is going to move into the official RDA version starting, well, it's already available, but the countdown clock starts in May 2026. At some point, there is not going to be a choice between original versus official. There will just be the official version that we see right now. So if vendors want to continue to maintain these contracts with libraries that require RDA compliant data, then they are going to have to start using the official RDA toolkit.
Okay, thank you. Next question. RDA is descriptive cataloging standard, which should be supported by Koha, meaning you can create bibliographic records in Koha that are RDA compliant. What do you know about experience of implementing RDA standard in Koha? Integrated library system.
Well, Hui-Ling and I are nodding to this. We don't use Koha. I think it's an open source library management system.
Yeah.
And it has Mark 21. Implementing RDA on it should be something that can be supported if it is an open source thing. So like introduction of 236, 237, 238 fields and so on should be all right.
By the way, what integrated library system your library use?
We use Innovative.
Yeah.
Okay,
thank you.
And, at University of Toronto, we use a library service platform provided by Ex Libris.
Okay. Next question. What type of criteria should or must be in translating standards in Asian languages? It's a broad question, not? Yeah, okay. So I think next time we discuss this issue, I hope.
I'm so sorry. May I provide just one small comment?
Yes.
I agree this is a very broad question that will require more of a conversation. And I encourage any communities that are interested in perhaps helping to develop a translation to get in touch with the RDA Steering Committee's translations team liaison. Or if you want, I can also help facilitate that connection if you want to reach out to me first. Either way will work.
Next question about can you share with your email to connect with? I saw that Elisa shared her email address in how to say chat. So please see there. Then we have one question from Gina D. Elvis. Gina, could you ask a question? Gina, you with us? She raised hand. Okay. Gina, please turn on your microphone. Okay. My question. You mentioned that there isn't a regional RDA committee for Asia. For example, National Library of Singapore can take these functions or not?
Please.
My question.
Sorry, can you repeat?
Yes. My question about in your presentation was noted that a regional RDA committee for Asia is absent for today. And my question is, for example, the National Library of Singapore as most advanced library institution in Asia can take these functions or not?
Peter, we are National Library Board Singapore is currently the national institution representative for Asia region, and I am currently filling that position, which subsequently will go to Hui-Ling. So if you're asking about continuing this conversation, creating the communities, etc., yes, definitely, we are driving this. with the immediate action being at next month's Consal, which is the Congress of Southeast Asian Librarians that's happening in KL, where we are putting up a request to the Executive Council of Consal to support the creation of a cataloging community for Southeast Asia. So the same can be done. In one of my slides, I have the 4 sub-regions. So the same can be done for the other 3 sub-regions, Central Asia, South Asia, as well as the India, Eastern Asia. But we can take the lead by coming up with the secretariat work right now for the Southeast Asian group, and that can be shared subsequently, because eventually it will still come back to the RDA board, of which Asia is represented. So yes, I've shared my email, and if anybody is interested to represent your particular region, do let me know. We will be very happy to hear that, because for quite some time, it has been quite difficult for us to reach out to the other areas in Asia.
Yeah, I would like to say that, of course, it's very remarkable presentations with theoretical aspects, with practical recommendations. But, for example, for new libraries who would like to implement RDA, of course, it's necessary to contact point to make first steps. I think it's quite understandable. So thank you, Elisa. So,
So time up?
Yes, time up. And
Want to share about the mailing list?
Mailing list? What do you mean? Mailing list?
Oh, sorry. I was talking to Hui Ling. The members of this for this webinar, it's possible we have the registrations, so it is possible for us to email you with information about RDA and future sharing such as this. And as I said, I already shared my email address, so do let me know if anybody is interested in forming a group.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So I'm very grateful for participation, our distinguished speakers and our very, how to say, dedicated participants, because topic of RDA quite complicated for mostly humanitarian workers. And I very appreciate participants, all of you, and I hope that this webinar will promote progress in implementation of very important technologies to be our libraries, how to say, progressive and on demand our users. Thank you very much. I wish good luck and success in your professional activities, and have a good day. Bye. Thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you all
Bye.
speakers and participants and the moderator.